Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a massive swing through history, psychology, and even finance.
We are.
We're going to explore this central paradox, this really bizarre disconnect between the obvious, sometimes deadly risks that were just happily accepted in the past and the hidden dangers we might be failing to see today.
That's really our mission here. The sources you've gathered give you this whirlwind tour of human blind spots.
Right.
And they really challenge your fundamental sense of what is safe or, what's normal.
Right.
We're going to be looking at how societal norms, massive corporate influence, even government agencies have, well, historically manipulated what we accept as risk.
And for you, the learner, the goal isn't just to collect shocking facts, though we definitely have some of those.
Oh, we do.
The real insight is in the context. Why did a doctor once think prescribing cigarettes for asthma was a good idea? And how do those exact same psychological vulnerabilities still govern what we trust right now?
Okay, so let's start with a look back.
Let's do it.
When you look back just a couple of generations, the whole idea of childhood safety was, well, it was radically different. It almost feels like we operated on a system of, if it doesn't immediately kill them, it must be fine.
It's a profound shift. You see it right away in just the casual chemical exposure that was part of growing up. The sources detail things that just sound impossible now, like kids sucking on 9-volt batteries just to get that zap on your tongue.
Right, that metallic jolt, I remember that.
Or, sniffing that super strong rubber cement when you're building models, probably in a room with no windows open.
The key there is what you could call sort of unsupervised toxicity. It's not that these things weren't toxic.
No.
It was that the long-term risk felt completely abstract and, the regulatory environment just wasn't there to care.
And you see this taken a step further with things that were priming kids for future vices, like candy cigarettes.
Ah, the classic.
I remember those. Not only did they train the muscle memory for smoking, but the sources confirm that some of them would actually poof out powdered sugar.
A little cloud of smoke.
A literal sugar-based simulation of nicotine addiction, and you're marketing it to 5-year-olds.
And that casual approach, it just culminates in the audacity of the deadly toy era. The most famous example, of course, is lawn darts.
Which weren't soft plastic things.
Oh, no. These were heavy metal-tipped javelins.
They were weapons.
Yeah.
And if you weren't standing right where they landed, they'd arc up high in the air and become this projectile missile coming down.
And the sources confirm, lawn darts were officially linked to 3 child deaths in the U.S. just between 78 and 86.
And if you look beyond the deaths, the injury rates are staggering.
Yeah. What were the numbers?
Over that same period, somewhere between 6,100 and 6,700 people, mostly children, were treated in U.S. emergency rooms for lawn dart trauma.
Wow. It took nearly a decade of that before regulators finally banned a toy that was such an obvious hazard.
But what really stands out is how we move from that obvious physical danger to something more insidious.
You're talking about the Atomic Energy Lab toy?
The 1950s Atomic Energy Lab.
That's where the blind spot becomes truly chilling, because that toy actually contained legitimate, if, small quantities of radioactive material.
It's unbelievable.
The fact that the risks of radiation were considered suitable for a kid's science kit just highlights this historical lack of concern for invisible, slow-acting dangers that, frankly, we still struggle with today.
And that lack of concern for long-term toxicity, it carries right through to how we treat chemical enhancement.
Right, whether for military use, like the historical note on Nazis allegedly being on meth during parts of WWII, or for modern productivity.
Exactly. The modern comparison point for performance and focus is, of course, Adderall.
The perception, especially in these high-demand fields like journalism or finance, is that everyone's on Adderall. It's seen as a tool you need to sustain that intense, hyper-focused state.
But this is where it gets really interesting. The sources bring up this major counter-argument from legitimate neuroscientists. They're suggesting that the diagnosis of ADHD is often fundamentally mischaracterized.
What's fascinating here is the pivot they make. They argue the core issue isn't a deficit of focus. It's a profound inability to focus on tasks you're not inherently interested in.
Right. So the whole narrative that someone with ADHD can't concentrate just falls apart when you see that same person hyper-focus for 10 hours on a video game or some passion project.
Exactly. The issue isn't the capacity to focus. It's the mechanism that triggers it.
So if you're faced with a low-interest task, like, balancing a spreadsheet, the brain struggles.
But if you actually have the condition, a stimulant can often calm and organize the mind instead of giving you that buzz that a non-diagnosed user is looking for.
This raises a huge question then. If the issue is a mismatch between brain function and boring societal demands, should we be changing the demands?
Well, the sources reference the Finnish education model as a counterpoint. In Finland, formal reading instruction is often delayed until age 7.
And the reason for that is fascinating. It's reportedly done specifically to allow children to develop their intrinsic ability to focus first before you impose the structure of literacy on them.
The idea is that they're more ready to engage properly. They don't need chemical intervention to keep them glued to a desk.
It really shows how much our cultural expectations can dictate what we end up calling a disorder.
And shifting from the regulation of the brain to the regulation of the body, we hit this other historical blind spot.
Yeah.
One centered on moralizing what we eat. We have to talk about the bizarre origins of breakfast cereal and John Harvey Kellogg.
This one sounds like a fever dream, but it's historical fact. Tell us about the anti-sex agenda.
So John Harvey Kellogg was a deeply religious physician, a Seventh-day Adventist, and he ran this famous sanitarium.
Right, in Battle Creek.
And he absolutely believed that bland, plain diets, specifically cornflakes and nuts, could reduce sexual desire and, most importantly, prevent masturbation.
He saw masturbation as a social and physical evil.
A profound evil. He genuinely believed the food you ate regulated your moral impulses. So while the Kellogg Company today might try to call this a myth,
They do.
the sources are clear that his core religious and moral beliefs were the direct influence for the experiments that led to mass-produced cereal. It was food as a tool for moral restraint.
And that idea of an agenda defining our diet, it becomes way more acute when we look at the history of nutritional advice.
Oh, absolutely. We've seen these highly criticized studies that at one point declared Fruit Loops were healthier than ground beef.
Which immediately makes you ask the critical question, right?
Who sponsored that study?
Exactly, who paid for it? And if you trace back the original food pyramid, you see how deeply flawed and lobbyist influenced that guidance was.
The food pyramid reversal is a perfect case study. We went from a base of almost all grains, suggesting like 6 to 11 servings a day,
An insane amount of grains.
to today's advice, which places meat, eggs, and healthy fats much more prominently. It shows how decades of established advice was just wrong, or at least driven by non-health interests.
And this skepticism, it fuels modern dietary movements. Take the carnivore diet advocates. Their whole argument is that plants don't want to be eaten, so they use chemical defenses.
Exactly. They call them anti-nutrients. And this isn't vague talk. They focus on specific compounds. When you look at the source material, what are the big 3 they always cite?
They zoom right in on 3 main groups. First, you've got oxalates.
Okay.
These are famously linked to kidney stones. Though, to be fair, cooking does mitigate the concentration of oxalates pretty significantly.
And the second one?
Then you have lectins. They're often in high concentrations in grains, beans, and nuts. Advocates claim they promote what's called leaky gut.
Irritating the gut lining.
Yeah, allowing toxins into the bloodstream. And finally, you have phytates, or phytic acid. These are criticized for binding to essential minerals, iron, zinc, calcium, and basically stopping your body from absorbing them.
So it underscores this modern mindset of just fundamentally distrusting established norms. And that deep distrust extends way beyond diet. It's central to how we now view institutions and the integrity of information.
We have this core human trait where we reject forced exposure.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we saw it years ago with that U2 album that was automatically put on everyone's phone. People were furious.
It was instant revulsion.
Because it was forced on us. We want to feel like we discovered information ourselves. We naturally resist being told what to think or like.
And this sensitivity to control is why systemic corruption is so corrosive. It requires an abuse of trust. And you see this tension, between the anonymous hate you see online versus the absolute necessity of anonymity for a legitimate whistleblower.
It's a double-edged sword for sure.
And the financial fraud we're seeing just illustrates how widespread this rot is. The sources has some jaw-dropping examples. Let's start with that LA Fire Aid report.
The findings there were shocking. It details this huge misuse of charitable funds. Reports showed, $100,000 funneled to specific podcasters?
$500,000 for political advocacy groups.
And then significant funds for executive salaries, bonuses, and even these bizarre line items like fungus planting projects.
It just paints a picture of brazen corruption where charity is just a pass-through.
And the scale goes global. There's that very serious claim about the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID.
The argument being that these government-funded groups can sometimes act as a vehicle for things too dirty for the CIA.
Using NGOs to, say, try and overthrow foreign governments under the guise of aid.
Then you have the massive domestic fraud, like the Somali daycare scandal in Minnesota. The claims being investigated involved the diversion of almost $700 million in federal funds.
But the detail from the sources, that's just unbelievable.
The cash in the luggage.
Nearly $700 million in cash detected in passenger luggage leaving the Minneapolis airport in the last 2 years, allegedly tied to money laundering and filtering funds back overseas.
When you hear numbers that large, tied to luggage at a domestic airport, it just shows the scale of the corruption.
It really does. And the historical parallel to this kind of manipulation is found in psychological operations or psyops.
Where information itself is the weapon, the sources detail this CIA operation in the Philippines in the 1950s that went way beyond propaganda. It leveraged local fear.
This is a truly dark piece of history. The Aswang vampire plot.
Tell us about it.
So, CIA operatives set an ambush for a rebel fighter that captured him, and then instead of just killing him, they punctured his neck with 2 holes, drained him of his blood, and left the body on a trail.
So the opposition force finds him.
And they're terrified. They believe a mythical vampire from their folklore, the Aswang, had killed their comrade. And this psychological terror successfully dislodged them. It's an incredible example of weaponizing superstition.
That whole concept of invisible danger, whether it's psychological or physical, it just underscores how exposed we are. Historically, we normalized toxin exposure that led to widespread suffering.
The examples are just tragic. The radium girls.
Women painting glow-in-the-dark watch dials with radioactive paint.
And getting horrific cancers because they would lick the brushes to keep a fine point. Or the shoe store x-rays machines used to size kids' feet that just bathed workers in radiation, causing foot cancer.
Nobody understood the true long-term risks until it was too late. And we face modern invisible chemical exposures too.
Often in everyday activities. The sources cite data suggesting that women who clean houses professionally using industrial solvents all day,
They're inhaling chemicals equivalent to smoking 3 packs a day.
leading to a much higher risk of lung disease. It's that constant low-dose exposure that gets us.
But the body has incredible resilience, and we're now learning how to harness that. This brings us to the discussion of red light therapy.
Right, which is a great example of applying physics to biological maintenance. It has reported benefits from improved vision to better collagen production,
And the key scientific concept here relates to our mitochondria.
which are the power plants inside our cells.
Exactly. When cells are under stress, they need energy ATP. Certain light frequencies, particularly red and near-infrared, are believed to interact with the mitochondria, stimulating more ATP production.
So you're basically giving the cell more fuel to heal itself.
You're using an intelligent, non-chemical input to facilitate natural repair.
Speaking of intelligent problem solving for the body, let's talk about the ultimate example of physical resilience, the reverse hyper machine.
That machine is such a powerful metaphor. It was invented by the legendary powerlifter Louis Simmons after he literally crushed his spinal discs.
And doctors told him he needed surgical fusion, which would have ended his career.
But instead of accepting that, he applied his engineering knowledge to his own body. He designed a machine. What was so revolutionary about it?
Well, it used this unique combination of motions. The descending movement actually decompressed his spine, giving the discs space to heal.
And then the ascending, swinging motion strengthened all the surrounding posterior muscles without any direct vertical loading on the spine.
It's just an extraordinary example of using creative intelligence to solve a physiological problem that conventional wisdom said was impossible. What a journey we've taken. We've seen this clear, terrifying pattern.
We really have.
From carcinogens hidden in toys and chemicals, to corporate manipulation of our diets, systemic financial corruption, and even intelligence operatives weaponizing fear. So many of the greatest dangers are either invisible or just socially accepted until the damage is done.
And this constant tension between human chaos and systemic logic, it forces us to reconsider the fundamental nature of reality itself. We started with historical blind spots, but let's end with the ultimate philosophical challenge raised in the sources.
Pythagoras' revenge.
Pythagoras' revenge.
The profoundly mind-bending idea that mathematics, which we see as a tool we invented to measure the universe, is actually the underlying structure that the universe is encoded with.
Right. From the spiral of a galaxy to the perfect hexagon of a honeycomb, the cosmos seems fundamentally, ruthlessly mathematical.
So what does this all mean for us?
Well, if the structure of the cosmos is mathematical and perfectly logical, and we as humans are defined by our recurring historical cycles of chaos, greed, and corruption, what path do we take when a fully logical, non-corrupt entity like an advanced AI comes to govern our reality?
Will it see our chaos and offers a way to adapt?
Or will it simply see us as a mathematical error and tell us to step aside?
That is the ultimate question for you to mull over. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.